Hello, I'm Lee Povey,
And I'm Steve Mallet.
and we are two high performers who have transitioned from the world of sport to business as high-performance executive and leadership coaches to those looking to take themselves and their companies to new heights,
The road to success can seem like a lonely one at times.
especially for a founder.
So we decided to form the Founders Catalyst, a show that provides the very support system necessary for founders, leaders, and high performers like you to receive the coaching, community, and catalyst required to ignite your journey.
To be clear, this is no place for fluffy content that only covers the highlights of achieving an ultimate goal.
Instead, our mission is to deliver the difficult conversations that most people may be afraid to have. The ones laced with truth, vulnerability,
And impactful insights from our first-hand experiences in the trenches with founders and leaders operating at the highest stakes.
You don't have to go it alone through the highs and lows of leadership and business ownership anymore.
Let us be the catalyst that you, your company, and your entire ecosystem need to excel in unprecedented ways.
This is the Founders Catalyst. Hello, everybody. Welcome in for another edition of the Founders Catalyst. With it being episode 2, it means, Lee, that we're officially podcasters now. I've been a podcaster for 6 years, and now that's it. That is your entire identity. You have to accept it as it is, and nothing can ever be changed. That's it. You're in with us now.
Sigh. I've tried to avoid it until now. I love being a podcast guest. I've been on plenty of other podcasts, including yours, as you love to tell me 3 times.
Yeah.
You know what? We've just got to this point, haven't we, where the need inside us to support people and be of service is so great around leadership that it just had to happen. It was time.
Yep. And again, if you're picking up this, one thing I always want to encourage folks, and I'll continue to do this as we move through episode after episode, is always go back and listen to maybe some of the more recent episodes. And in this case, you've only got one to go back and listen to because it was literally the first one, and this is only the second one. And you'll learn a lot more about what we're trying to do and the mission of this show. But today, I'm excited to dive into this. I think there's going to be some amazing content here in terms of just our own worlds. And in a fun way, I want to just sort of explain this through a sentiment of, why can't the world be more like me, Lee? Why can't the world adapt to everything that I need and I want from my perspective? Why is it not that easy, Lee? Why is it not that easy?
This is something I struggle with daily, Steve.
Yeah.
I still don't understand why everybody else doesn't think about me, because obviously I am perfect. And my view on the world is the only value. I can't even say it now. So something you're going to learn about me, now would be a good time to introduce it, is I'm strongly dyslexic. Now, I used to call myself severely dyslexic. And actually, a lot of the time, this is not a handicap. This is a superpower because it gives me some gifts that are super useful for what I do and have made my journey through the world interesting. However, there's 2 areas where it really can play up. One, and you'll see this on the podcast, and maybe we can have fun with this and guess, you listeners out there can put into the comments how many times you hear me mispronounce something. It's going to be fairly regular. So we'll start with that. This has been a real struggle for me. Like, joking aside, this is a struggle for me. This is a struggle for the people that I work with. My typical client is the smartest person in the room, or at very least the most capable person for most of the rooms that they walk in. And they just can't understand why other people don't think like them. And to begin with, they don't even realize that other people don't think like them. So the first part of that journey is helping them realize that other people don't think the way do. And then the second part of that journey is, okay, now you understand that people don't think the way that you do. Now you have to accept that people don't think the way that you do. And to expect them to think like you do is a bit like Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So, yeah, this journey in life, we get born, we move through our family system. There's a particular way our family system does things. There's a particular way that our brain works and processes information. There are the stories that we have created in our brain to understand the world and to describe the world to ourselves. And they are just for us. And they are not necessarily the same experiences that other people have in. And even though me and you will often see some similar stories being told by our clients, there's always subtle differences to them. And as and when we can understand that they're just stories and they're not necessarily reality, life gets a lot more fun. And the way we relate to other people can be a lot more effective.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to touch on something real quick, that we'll be issuing Founders Catalyst Lee dyslexic bingo cards as we go through the series, just so you can always just complete in the bingo card of certain words that you hear, and you can just circle it as you go and all that kind of thing. But I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I come up with these great ideas. It might sell, it might market, it may not. We'll see. But to your point, one thing I always like challenging clients on is just simply asking sometimes when they are voicing something where it seems to be a story, is to sort of nudge them and to say, whose perspective are you speaking from right now? Because a lot of the time it's helping someone see that they are in fact speaking from a perspective, that what they are currently providing in what they feel is the form of the truth, the reality. As they speak through it, you sit there as a coach and you hear it and you go, this is their perspective, and I need to help them see that. And just a simple like just encouragement of, hey, whose perspective are you speaking from right now? Yeah, it immediately it softens the blow, doesn't it? It softens the blow. Just like, listen, I get it. I get that you think that this is all about on your terms and seeing it from but how do we actually just nudge someone to say, this is actually just a perspective, and the sooner you get to that perspective, the easier the coaching and the work around you is actually going to become.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually have a tool that I use with my clients on that. And I get them to imagine a camera is recording the conversations that they're having. And then I say to them, what would the camera record? And obviously the camera records the words that are said and the interaction, but it doesn't record the stories that you're making up in your mind about what the other person thinks, about what you think, about what a situation may be. It just records what's actually happening in that moment. And it's a really good way to get people to think about, how much more am I adding to this that isn't necessarily there? When you're in conversation with somebody and you're thinking, oh, I wonder what this other person's thinking about me right now. Do they trust me? Do they believe me? Do they disagree with me? Are they bored? And very often people don't stop and actually ask those questions. They don't stop and say, hey, I just want to check in. How's this conversation going for you? Are we aligned? Do you have some disagreement? Or, hey, I noticed you seem to be typing away over there. Are you taking notes, or are you doing something else? Would there be a better time for us to have this conversation? You seem a bit distracted and I want to check in. I find that people assume a lot about other people without ever checking in. And then they create those stories in their brain from those assumptions. And this person doesn't like me. And, I hear that all the time. I work with this person, they don't like me. And I might coach both of those people in the company. And I know that person has never said to me, I don't like Bob.
Right.
So this is a story that they've created in their head. And then when we can start challenging those stories and think, what would a camera record? What is reality? And then, okay, now how can I actually go and get some information? Because if I've created this story and I don't know whether it's true or not, the simple answer is just go ask the questions to find out whether it's true or not.
Yeah, and it's funny because storytelling is a powerful resource in some ways, and yet internally, it seems to have the opposite effect. Internally, it seems to have this way of creating a somewhat diluted version of reality. We suddenly now miss out on some of the things that are right in front of us, and we see things that simply aren't there as well. You know, we start to do that through this storytelling that goes on within ourselves. And one area that I find myself spending a lot of time is the notion of limiting beliefs that can come and start to manifest because of these stories that we tell ourselves. So it starts with the story perspective. The limiting belief then starts to anchor itself in so many ways within us. And what's worse is that then this limiting belief becomes almost a catalyst for further story. You know, it starts to provide even more story. It gives these stories more substance, more depth. And suddenly, before long, this limiting belief in itself has become this just internal machine, if you will, of just providing perspective that just simply isn't helping or enforcing growth, isn't helping or enforcing a collaborative or effective team, and it's certainly not enforcing the type of performance that you want within your respective business. So for me, I'm curious, just as I'm saying this, Lee, like where has limiting belief played up? Because I've got some stories of my own. I'd love for you to share a story to get us going. Of just like, where's limiting beliefs played a part for you, mate?
I knew this was coming. I could just feel it as you were chatting. You know, so a strong one for me is I'm unlovable. So, you know, background about me. My dad was a sociopathic narcissist. And I've spoken about this on podcasts before, so you can go check it out. The quick summary is, and I don't say that as like, oh, you know, he liked himself a bit and he was a bit mean. I'm talking about he would clinically be diagnosed as a sociopathic narcissist. So he lacked the ability to have empathy for others, and everything was about him. So it didn't matter what I did, I could never truly get love from that man because he was never truly capable of love as we would think of love. So the story that's created in me, even though I had a wonderful mother who was super loving, is there's still this belief at times that I'm not lovable, especially when I'm in conflict with other people. And then what happens, you know, you're talking, I was really thinking about, well, what do we do with these stories? Well, then these stories start to become beliefs, as you said, limiting beliefs, and then we take them on as personality traits. And this is where a lot of my work is like uncovering those personality traits that we've taken on. And, you know, for me, some of the behaviors would be, I would tease people too much. So, you know, in the UK, where we're from, teasing is a way of showing love. You don't tease people you don't like. If people are very polite to each other in UK, it typically means they don't actually like
It's passive aggressive.
So, you know, when you've got to that point, you know, when you got to that point that you have a decent relationship in UK, nothing's off the table and the teasing can be quite brutal. But I would do that maybe too early in a relationship before that rapport had been established, or I'd do it in groups. And there's a big difference between teasing one-to-one and teasing in a group, because now it looks like you're putting the person down in the group. And I might do that with the aim of wanting to be loved, but I'd go too far because I was like desperate to be loved rather than just enjoying other people's company and being playful. You know, with my coaches, we came up with 5 words that describe me, and one of those words is play. Like, play is an integral part of what I do every day. However, when we kind of get to the shadow part of that, when we get to the overexpression and the bad behavior part of play for me, the unhealthy parts of play for me is, then I get mean. I get mean because I tease other people. And I can either use it as a weapon or I use it as this thing to try to be loved. But you know what? When you try to be loved, that's when it doesn't work. That's when you actually push people away. And it took me a while to realize that, even though when I was young, my mum said to me, just be yourself. You don't need to be anything but yourself. And here we are, I'm 51 now, and I'm just figuring out all I need to do is be myself and people will love me. I'm a pretty lovable guy.
Yeah.
But there's still that little boy inside that struggles with that because his dad didn't know how to. Well, not so much didn't have the part of his brain that worked to even do that.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely be acknowledging a number of insights over the years that we've both received that we did absolutely nothing with that insight in the moment when it was provided. There's no doubt about that, and I joked about it even in the first episode, is that we're going to have probably many, many more accounts of failures and letdowns to really support some of our points than we will success stories. And it's funny, my limiting belief is around potential. I was a younger sibling, had a grade A older sister, everything by the book, and I was 2 years behind her in school. My entire school career, all the same teachers, which is very normal in the UK, in the small towns. So I would just come up 2 years afterwards, and I was never Steve. I was Caroline's younger brother. I was never Steve. I was Caroline's younger brother. And so that was the shadow from an intellect standpoint that I was having to live in. And anything and everything that I was being assessed by throughout my entire school life, at least up to the age of 16, was through the eyes of a potential that wasn't mine. Wasn't my potential. It was my sister's potential. It was my sister's ability, in fact, that was being almost regurgitated into me by my teachers as the potential that I should be striving for, or the potential that I should be realizing in the work that I do. And the fact of the matter was, because of that, teachers weren't actually seeing what my true potential was and where it lay. They looked past that. And so my entire childhood was just me almost feeling like I was shouting and screaming and saying, hey, my potential's over here, folks. My potential's over here. But nobody wanted to hear that. And so all I heard, mom and dad would go off to a parents' night, and I'd come back, and it was just a list. It was a list from mom and dad saying, all your teachers think that you're falling short of your potential. That's all I got. That was the feedback I got my entire childhood. And you, after by about the age of 14, 15, you're like, you don't need to tell me. I know what it's going to say. I'm already there. I know how they feel about the way in which I'm applying myself, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the irony of this, Lee, is that because, and I've done a lot of work through therapy on this, because of the teacher's inability to recognize where my potential actually lay, I didn't want to try as hard. I didn't want to apply myself because I was like, you're not even going to notice. You're not even going to notice.
You could only but fail, Steve.
I could only but fail. So I carried that through all of my 20s, all of my athlete career, was this notion in the back of my mind is, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. And in many ways, people will hear that and say, oh, that's a great tool to have. It's like, well, it came at a price. It came at a price a lot of times. And I've done so much work throughout my 30s. I'll be 39 this year. And I can now comfortably say that, my potential is clear to me. My potential is clear to those that know me best. And I'm very comfortable with that now. But that version of me, Lee, that voice, he's still there. He's not going away. He never probably will go away. I've just learned how to talk and interact with him a little bit more, much more effectively, let's say, at this point in my life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's an important distinction is this. I'm going to swear, I'm British. The shit that we carry from our childhood, it doesn't disappear. I think there's a belief by some people that with coaching and therapy and, men's groups and AA and all the different modalities that you can go through that help you understand yourself and improve, that these things just disappear, and they don't. They're going to be there for the rest of your life to some degree or other. What happens though is, as you get this advanced level of self-understanding, is that you recognize them. And when you recognize them, you can change your behavior.
Yep. That's it. And for me, cough it out, mate. For me, the key here is doing the work to just simply acknowledge when we have shifted out of reality and into this position of story. And for me, the work that I'm doing right now, while I suggested that earlier around this notion of simply asking the question of, hey, whose perspective are you speaking from? I think it's really important here just to also address, and this is just my coaching insight, and I'm excited to hear yours too, mate. Like, for me, when we do shift from reality into story, it's almost moving into a detective mode, if you will, and saying, what was the catalyst there? Like, was there a person that created this? Was it a situation that created this? Like, where did the shift happen and why? I love going through that process as a coach, because most of the time it does take a while to practice that awareness of, hey, this is when it's happening and this is why it's happening. But for me, I love starting there. I'm curious where you maybe start, mate.
Yeah, no, I love that. I've often asked clients, whose voice is that? Like, whose voice is that? Was that your teacher's voice saying that you're falling short of your potential? Was that your parents' voice saying that you're short of potential? And then, little Steve takes that on as his own voice. But it's not your own voice. It's not the genetic personality traits that you were born with. It's something that you've taken on through your experience. There was something I wanted to come back to, a little kind of teaching on psychology and what happens and where we process this information in our brain. So you were talking earlier about when we keep these stories internal, and how they kind of affect us. And there's a reason for that. So when we're talking to ourselves, we keep these stories in our kind of, you can think of it as your child part of your brain or your emotional part of your brain, your amygdala. And these stories get stored up with emotion. There's lots of passion and anger and sadness and fear that go into these. And they can feel very emotive and stay very emotive. However, when we write them down, and especially when we speak them to somebody else and hear ourselves talking about them, it's much easier for us to establish them as stories and not reality, because then it's actually our cognitive part of our brain. It's our prefrontal cortex that listens to that story. This is why talk therapy works so well, because you take all of these emotions, you take these stories that you've stored up, you tell them to a trained professional who listens to them and then reflects them back to you, and you hear them back and you go, oh God, that's not really true, is it? Oh, that's not really my experience. That's why coaching works. That's why venting to your friends works. As long as it doesn't move to gossiping, but if it's staying in venting, there's a huge processing part that happens to venting. I know, for me especially, if I can ring a friend up, I can share all of my emotions, I can vent all of the anger, frustration, sadness, and fear, then I'll hear it and then I go, oh, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was, or this isn't as catastrophic as I thought it was. This isn't the end of the world. Okay, now what do I want to do? And then I can start moving to solution and to options and to choices. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the place to vent correctly, because they'll be venting to somebody who, instead of listens, starts offering them solutions straight away. So they can't get it all out first, which is an important part of it. It's like, I need to share it all first. And then they just get more and more wound up because they feel like they're not being heard. Or that person has a vested interest. I need to fix you and save you right now. I need to take your pain away, which is, again, why therapists are so good, because their job is not to take your pain away. Their job is to listen, to reflect, to offer tools, to give you the opportunity to start armoring yourself up so that you know how to look after yourself. And I'm just going to finish with one little funny story, because, while we're dunking on ourselves, I'll go for a big one. When I first started therapy, I'm sitting there with a therapist, and end of session number 1, therapist James, this wonderful man, looks at me and he says, Lee, a lot of this is going to be about your dad. And I'm like, no way, James. I don't care about that bloke. I haven't cared about him since I was 14 years old. I've put my shield up. And he just looked at me with that smile that therapists have and the slight nod of, sure, buddy, sure. That's what his face was telling me. 6 months later, we're in another therapy session. I'm like, hey, James, I feel like a lot of this stuff is about my dad and my relationship with my dad. Again, same smile, just that nod and the little smile. And I wanted to share that because it kind of related to what you said earlier about we can be told things by a coach, by a therapist, by friends, and they won't resonate until we're ready to hear them. And that's why these things are often long engagement, right? You know, a coaching it's not typically one coaching session that moves the needle forwards. It's not one therapy session that moves the needle forwards. These things take time because we have to be ready to really be able to hear it and for it to sink in.
I'm so glad that you added that last piece of time, because at the end of the day, if you've been telling yourself, if you're working with a founder who's in their 30s, their 40s, that's a bloody long time to tell yourself a story. Like, you know, just me coming in and saying like, hey, you know, you're telling yourself a story. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't fix a thing. And I think that is one of the trickiest pieces of this. It's why to this day, I would still argue that the majority of folks, I think it's always moving in a positive direction, but the majority of folks are resistant to therapy work and working with a coach, but it's all moving in a positive direction, there's no doubt, because people see the time, they see the commitment, they know it's going to be a while until whatever it is they're taking in is going to feel as though it's moving in the right direction and they're seeing a payoff for the work that they're doing. And what I like about us bringing this up here so early on in the existence of this show is that wherever you are in your journey, there's never going to be a better time than right now to start working on the impact that story is playing in your mind. You know, it's just, there's never going to be a better time than right now. No matter, even if you feel as though you're in the most positive of headspaces in this moment, adversity is waiting for you. It's just waiting around that corner down the road at any moment. And the fact of the matter is, you want to be in a position come adversity where you are mentally capable of seeing the reality of the adversity and not allowing any perspective or idea of the adversity to creep in. And for anybody watching the video, I've got 2 thumbs up so far. I'm going to see if I can get a third one. This desktop of mine, it does its own thing. It just starts adding thumbs up at any point. Anyway, I'm getting derailed. Thoughts?
I don't think anything exceptional comes in life without a lot of time being put into it. You know, we've worked with Olympic level athletes. You don't get, you know, the person sitting at home sees somebody competing at Olympics and they have no idea how long it took to get there. Most of the people competing at the Olympics, they're probably, I think the average is they've been in that sport for at least 8 years. They probably were in another sport or even multiple sports before that. It takes time to create real change. As you said, if you've been telling yourself a story and you've been convinced that story is now a truth, and you've been telling yourself that story probably since you're a little kid, or you've been hearing that story from outside influences from a little kid, it's going to take time. And even if cognitively, even if the adult part of you goes, oh, I get that, before the little kid can accept it, that's going to take some time. And the way I look at the world is, we are essentially all little kids. We want to be loved and we want to be seen. And the more we understand about what it is we want to be loved for, and the more it is about what we want to be seen for, the more we understand the activations and the triggers that we're going to have and the pitfalls, the things that are going to catch us up. I want to be seen for being smart. So I'm sorry, buddy. I was that big brother.
That's all right.
I'm that horrible one. I was a big brother that was better than my little brother. Intellectually, I'm not smarter than him, but I just did better at school than he did, and I was better at sport than he was. So he was in my shadow of like, every time I'm just going to get compared to Lee, and it's unfair. So what did that develop in me? That developed in me that I got seen for being good athletically. So now as a 51-year-old man who 3 years ago retired from competitive cycling, I'm looking down at my legs and I'm like, why are these things so skinny? I don't really have skinny legs. But compared to where I was, my legs are skinny, and I'm looking down and I'm like, oh, why are they so skinny? It shouldn't matter, but it does, because that's part of my identity. That's part of my story. And the other one for me is being smart. And especially as I have a wound around that because of my dyslexia, which was not diagnosed when I was younger, the message I got at school, so compared to your message, the message I got at school was, you're really smart, but you're lazy.
Right.
And I'm not lazy. You don't become an elite athlete and run elite sports programs when you're lazy.
Right.
You don't become a founder when you're lazy. However, there's still that belief that I'm lazy if I'm not doing probably too much. And there's that question about, am I really smart or not? So I will get caught trying to prove I'm smart. And that's not... Other adults don't want me trying to show them how smart I am. Doesn't create connection, and it doesn't make them feel better about themselves. So I just have to keep being aware of that, and it will pop up. And now my choice is to acknowledge it and share with somebody, hey, I feel like I'm just trying to be smart right now. I don't need to do that. I'm going to step back. I'm going to invite you back into the conversation.
Think about where we started here. Why can't the world be like me? And as we talk through this, I find us 30 minutes later in this conversation, and I'm thinking, okay, if someone is dealing with that very frustration right now, of just like, why are these people not seeing what I'm seeing? Why are people not hearing what I'm saying? All this kind of stuff. What I'm taking from our conversation right now is that you have some work to do on you to begin with, as opposed to looking out straight away and assuming there's something wrong around you. It's saying, wait a second, before I jump to that part of this, because we can have discussions around that, and a lot of that may be validated in time as well. But just stop for one moment, press pause, and say, if you are in this mindset that people around you or the world around you is not functioning to the way in which you assume it should be, start with you. Start internally and start asking some of these questions of the origin of why that might be. And then we can start to maybe get into some of the work that comes along with that as well. And I actually love that in this conversation, mate, we've not really gotten too far away from that sentiment, because there's still this is just the first layer of this problem in many ways. What is going on my screen? I've got celebrations going on now. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're getting an absolute show. I'll just say that. But anyway, I've been completely thrown off now because there's fireworks going on off behind my back. So anyway, what was I saying, mate?
It's
I got to turn it off. I got to turn it off.
Where when you do hand gestures, you're going to need to turn it off for the podcast. When you do hand gestures, you get thumbs up, you get firework. This is a fun feature. It's great on Zoom.
My Lord.
It just randomly happens. It really, when you're right in the middle of it with an executive group and everybody's getting emotional and angry or sad or whatever in the middle of a call, and then suddenly there's fireworks going off. It's a great one for lightening the mood. Yeah. Yeah, I think let's wrap up with, this is a long journey. This is why we started a podcast. We're not going to fix this in one episode, and whether it needs to be fixed or not. What I want to leave people with is, it's kind of two ways that you can look at the world. Is the world happening to me, or is the world happening by me? And we're going to do a whole podcast episode on that for sure. But I just want to leave people thinking, are you reacting to the world? And are you reacting to the stories that you've told yourself? And how would you like to be instead? Because there's a different way. Because I've been there. I've been there where I would react to any challenge on my intelligence. There would be a big reaction for me. Any challenge on my lovability, there'd be a big reaction for me. Now, there's usually curiosity. It's like, I'm interested why you see it that way. Or interested why I'm not necessarily gelling with this person. And maybe the best example I can give of this, and I use this a lot in my coaching, is you're sitting at home, you receive a text message. The text message says, we need to talk. How do you respond? If your initial response is, oh, fuck, what have I done? Oh, no, are they going to have a go at me? Oh, no, did I do something wrong? Oh, no, does this person hate me? You got some work to do. Your response should be, oh, interesting. I wonder what we're going to talk about. And when I share this, and I do this in workshops, and I share this with individuals, I would say the large majority of people go, "Oh no, I've done something wrong," or "What is wrong?" And they either get defensive or they get anxious. And the world is so much more fun when your response to any stimulus is curiosity rather than anger or fear.
And on that note, what a wonderful place to just simply stop and put a pin in it for now. And I think it's a great thing to address as well with this. While this is the second episode, it's the first episode where we've gone into some specific content. And I don't think I'm speaking for you by saying this, but it's not necessarily going to be a flowing, like, we're not going to just pick this conversation up the next time we speak. It could be something completely different. We will find ways to connect episodes to other episodes. We'll try to reference them at times and give you this sort of lay of the land and help you maybe go from one episode, which could be episode 2 to episode 17 to episode 53. And those 3 episodes, for whatever reason, have something in common. But I hope you hear yourself in some way, shape, or form in this, because if you do, just understand that makes you one of us. It makes you part of the population. It makes you part of society because it's a societal thing. It's a normal human behavior, and we're all working on it. And the ones that are willing to work on it, talk about competitive advantage, which we're all about on this show. That's giving you a competitive advantage right there.
I love that.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to go back and listen to any dyslexic comments that you made. But aside from that, people, this has been an absolute pleasure. And this is Steve saying goodbye for now. Lee?
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks again for listening to the show. If you like what you heard, appreciated the witty banter, and of course, appreciated the quality of the insights we provided, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating.
It helps us reach a larger audience so we can support more people just like you. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform.
There will never be a better time than now to start investing in yourself, so be sure to act upon what you took from this episode and let us know how it goes. We love hearing from our audience.
From Steve Meller and myself, Lee Povey, thanks for listening and being you.